Thanks for being with us this evening. I think next time we should do a little karaoke or something instead of awkward silence, just to kind of get the ball rolling. We like to start on time, so 7:02 we figure is enough leeway, just like the leeway in mom jeans, just a little extra room, and we'll get going. All right. So thank you so much for being here. I'm Kathleen Glynn Sparrow with the College Coaches. Tonight, you'll meet our speakers in just a second. Some topics that we'll cover tonight are what's it like to apply to college now in 2023, mistakes to avoid in the process, when to begin, and just as importantly, how to begin. Differing perspectives. I don't know if you've noticed in your house that sometimes the parents and the students might have a little bit different point of view. Never happened in my house, but maybe in yours. Just kidding. Talk about finding the right fit and why a counselor might be helpful to you for the college process. And then we will turn it over to our fantastic collaborator, Kelly from Compass Education Group, and she will get you up to speed on what's the latest and greatest and not so greatest with the SAT, ACT, and testing and all that good stuff. So without further ado, we'll each introduce ourselves. As I mentioned, I'm Kathleen Glynn Sparrow. I have been in schools for 25 years, either college counseling or serving as English department chair, English teacher, or both. That photo there, my college friends say it makes me look like Macy's Employee of the Month. I thought I was rocking that cardigan, but okay, whatever. And I used to work for Macy's, so I'm cool with it. I have been in schools locally, such as St. Andrew's Episcopal School, the McLean School in Potomac, Maryland, and Stone Ridge in Bethesda. I learned most from my own two kids going through the process. They taught me everything I didn't know about the emotions in the process, theirs and mine. Everybody has the same goal, happy ending, but we have different ways of how to get there. But they both survived. Maddie graduated from Duke and is teaching high school English. And Aiden is a junior at University of Miami studying theater arts and currently in London this semester. My own college journey, I went to Duke for undergrad, majored in English and French, and then I went on to Emory to get a master's in education. On to my colleague, Becky.
So good evening. My name is Becky Bowlby. I'm one of the head coaches. I just recently retired as a college counselor from Lower Merion High School, which is a large public high school located outside of Philadelphia and the home of Kobe Bryant. Prior to those 11 years, I worked in college admissions for 30 years at a wide variety of different types of institutions in and around the Philadelphia area. Very involved in both the state and national college and counseling associations so that I can stay current. As Kathleen said, I also had a college journey. I have a bachelor's degree in sociology and religion from Wagner College, which is a liberal arts school in New York, and a master's in higher educational counseling and a secondary certification in counseling from Westchester University, which is one of the 14 state universities in Pennsylvania. And now I'm going to turn it over to Kelly from Compass.
Thanks, Becky. And just let me say thank you to the College Coaches team for inviting me to speak. I am a director for Compass Education Group. I'm heading up our DMV area office. So I've been doing a lot of work in the last year to expand our team and our in-person offerings for one-on-one instruction for academic, AP, test prep. My history, my own college journey took me from Omaha, Nebraska to USC. I was in the BFA acting program, but after a couple of years, my trajectory it took me into more of the area of a facilitator. And over time, I drifted to arts education. And by the time I moved to the DMV area in 2015, I made the switch completely to education. I've been working in schools and loving it. And in DC, I spent over 5 years working locally, supporting families through their test preparation, academic tutoring, and overall college admissions journeys. So I love the work that I do with families to help them navigate this kind of ambiguous landscape, especially at a time like this, and really excited to get you all caught up to speed on the testing landscape.
Excellent, thank you. And I should mention tonight's presentation is being recorded in case you want to take a nap during it, wake up, late, come back later, just kidding. It is being recorded and will be posted on our website along with our other webinars. You'll also have the opportunity to post questions in the Q&A, and we will have time for Q&A at the end. You can post anonymously or using your name. All right, talking about perspective, question for you parents out there. Whenever you say to your son or daughter, cherub, when I was your age or when I applied to college, what is their reaction? I'm guessing they either put in their headphones, unpause, unmute Netflix, or exit stage left. So that approach never works, but we all continue to do it, myself included. What's important to realize as you enter the college process is using your own filter, which maybe 30 years ago for some of us like myself, is not going to move you and your student forward in the process in a happy way. A lot has changed since you've applied. We're going to talk about that in just a second, but I would encourage you to be a support. That's the main role that I would encourage you to follow in the process, not the, keep it going, keep it going, keep it going. They have a lot of pressure coming at them internally and externally. So be the supporter. Okay, so what's changed? A lot has changed. Students now apply to more schools, 8 to 12. When I applied, it was maybe 3 or 4. We didn't characterize our colleges as likely target reach. We kind of made fun of our college counselor. She was a crazy lady in a basement. I am a crazy lady, but I'm not in a basement, or am I? You can't really tell with the fake background, can you? And by the way, I was on a webinar and said that, and it turns out a high school classmate was on, and she was like, yes, our college counselor was a little wacky. So you have to be wacky to do this job. Demonstrated interest didn't exist back in the day. Now colleges, some of them keep track of whether you visited or done a virtual visit, even opened emails, which is pretty big brothery. Selectivity has changed. You might think, well, University of Maryland, done. Much different acceptance rate last year, around 42%. Northeastern is another college that has just exploded. Their acceptance rate last year, 7%. So I don't say this to scare you or say, oh, your kid's not going to get in anywhere. It's just to say things have changed. And so just be open to the fact that a school that was one way when you were going through the process may be a little bit differently now. But you'll still annoy your kids during the process. I can guarantee that. Okay, well, here's one of the mistakes that parents seem to make. Starting too early. 9th grade should be about finding your locker, figuring out your combination, losing your combination, getting a new combination, finding a friend group, who you're going to sit with at lunch. It is not about finding your college. Think about for a second, what were you like at 14 in 9th grade? I know I'm bringing back some pretty scary memories for myself. My priority was probably which kind of Bonnie Bell lip gloss was I going to wear that day? And would I do a side ponytail or a high ponytail? Those were my big life questions, not where am I going to go to school in 4 years? So 9th grade, just let them adjust to high school. The kid is 14. I repeat, the kid is 14. Okay, another mistake we see is parents panicking about PSAT scores. The P in PSAT actually stands for preliminary, doesn't stand for panic. I consider the PSAT purely practice. Just have so much fun sitting 3 hours, circling things in. It's amazing, really. It's not at all. It's practice. I often see parents get the students' first PSAT score, like perhaps in 10th grade, and they're devastated. And their kids can feel that. And they're thinking, well, it's not what we expected. I guess we can take this, that, and that school off the list. That is not the case at all. The performance on PSAT I have not seen in 25 years be a direct correlation to how the college process is going to work out. Okay. And if your student is not a great test taker in general, or it causes an undue amount of anxiety, there are hordes of schools that are test optional now, almost 80%, and they're outstanding schools that are brilliant. All right, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Becky.
Thank you, Kathleen. So talking constantly about college can be very stressful, so don't do it all the time. Instead, limit your college talk to one time a week. So as you see here on the slide, maybe Sundays at 2 p.m., not when you have them in the car and they can't jump out. One time a week, keep a list of all of your questions, come with all of your questions, any concerns that you have, and ask your student to be accountable as well. Excellent. So how to begin and when to begin? Slow and steady wins the race. Make sure that your student is emotionally available to discuss college. Otherwise, you know what you're going to get? Whatever, I don't know, or fine. Does your student even want to go to college, or do they see their future differently? Does talking about it add stress? And if they do see their future differently, maybe you want to talk about other options, like taking a gap year, volunteering, getting a job, etc. So there could be some differences in how you as a parent make decisions and how your student makes decisions about the whole college process. You as a parent, you're worried about how much does it cost? How prestigious is the school? You want to validate those 18 years of parenting. Is the major that they've chosen going to lead to a job? What about career advising? Is there networking that goes on at the school? You want them to have fun, but not too much fun. And you want them to be close to home. Do you? The student, on the other hand, wants fun, freedom, a cool roommate, a great location, concerts, who's coming to play, sing, whatever, sporting events, good food. Good luck with that. Although that's come long way since I went to college. Trust me. Far from home, or maybe not far from home. Parenting hack. Just kidding. There are no hacks. Everything's hard. Sometimes these kids do not listen. This is your life now. So Godspeed. So what are the factors to think about in a college search? Obviously, academic offerings. What kind of majors does a college have? How big is the school and how big are the class sizes? What kind of activities, clubs, organizations, sports does the school have? How far from home is the school located? Is it far, like we said? Do you want them close to home? Is it in an urban setting, a suburban setting, a rural location? What are the internship opportunities like? You want to get, because the goal, honestly, right? You want your student to go to college, but honestly, do you want them living in your basement? Kathleen was talking about a basement. Want your kid in your basement for the rest of their lives? No. You want them to have a career. You want them to have internship opportunities, right? If your child needs some academic support, if they have a learning difference or what kind of academic support does the school offer? And what about the community that surrounds the college or university? What's that like? And do you like it? So a good fit is critical, and why is that? So let's say your student makes a choice and it turns out to be not the right fit, maybe not the right choice. So what do? They end up transferring after a year. Sometimes you have an unhappy student, and certainly not one who's working up to their potential. And there's been a lot of investment of not only time, but money with little or no return. One of the things that is very important to really check out is that if you can afford a school, and discuss that with your student. It is very hard on a student who gets accepted to XYZ school and then can't afford to go. That can be really devastating. A situation like that when I worked at Lower Merion with a student who was accepted to NYU, wanted to go there. And on May 1st, which is the day when you're supposed to put your deposit down at a college, parents told the student that she couldn't go there because they couldn't afford it. So if you can avoid that, try and avoid that at all costs. And you are not where you go to school. This is really a critical point. your child's success and the fit is much more important, not the name of the school. So how to find a good fit? Maybe you want to start early in sophomore year. Kathleen already said ninth grade is way too soon, but 10th grade, it's okay. You ease into it, do it casually by maybe going to some local schools. You want to check out different types of schools. So go to some large schools, a small school, a public school, a private school. Check out different locations like I mentioned already, suburban, urban, rural, different acceptance rates. Follow the college's social media. Check out if they have a newspaper online and what kinds of issues are going on the campus. What's important. If you happen to know any current students who attend that university, talk to them. They know firsthand what it's like to be there. Read the FISC Guide to Colleges. That really offers some good information. And parents, remember, this is 4 years for your student, not the parent.
So how can we help? This is an important life decision. It's a big purchase like a house or a car, and it's good to have advice, and it's expensive. I don't think you would walk up to houses in a neighborhood, knock on the door and say, I don't know, should we buy this one? You want to get some guidance. So it's a smart move. The writing that's involved in the process, the essays and the supplements, needs to be compelling and clear. Practice for the interview is important. Teens today, they tweet and they text, but they don't really talk very often with adults. So they need practice at that, and that's somewhere we can help. We can help you make sure you have a balanced college list so that you have happy choices in the end, and that you're getting the most out of your visits. If you're taking time off from work and school and spending money to travel, stay in a hotel, eat out, you want to make sure that you're getting the most out of those visits. Public school kids are getting a fantastic education and they have terrific college counselors, but the reality is the college counselors at public schools often have hundreds of students to help. And if your student needs a little bit more accessibility, we can help with that. Private school students, same thing. Great education, great college counselors, but sometimes it's good to have a second opinion. This is what I do for a living. Even my kids have college counselors. It's often helpful to have another adult just to kind of hear what your student's saying. So it makes sense. We are also available summer, weekends, evenings, and school breaks. That's correct. We have no life. That goes for all of our coaches. While I'm on that, I'll mention that all of our coaches are lifelong educators. Nobody has come to this as a second hobby, and this is everybody's job. Nobody works and then comes to do this. So this is us all the time. I won't go down the rabbit hole on this, just a quick snapshot. You can look at this at your leisure. I'm saying leisure since my son is studying abroad in London. I'm trying to be classy. It's not working, I know. This is what we usually recommend for families. The game season pass for juniors has 7 meetings, a college list tailored to your cherub, and resources that will help you throughout. We start with a family meeting where we listen to your hopes and dreams and juniors' hopes and dreams and find where we can intersect. We talk about teacher recs, we talk about standardized testing, a timeline for the process, answer your questions, all that good stuff. I'll let you read through the rest of the details on your own. With the resources that come with our summer activity database that is arranged by area of interest. So instead of Googling for 70 hours, you can go STEM programs, business programs. We've got it at your fingertips. Most recent admission rates and test ranges, merit aid, tips for visiting. You can email us 24/7. We're not going to respond 24/7, but you can email us 24/7. No charge for emails. And this 7 meeting college list package is $34.99, but wait for it. You don't get a set of knives, but you get $200 off if you sign up this month. All right, I won't go into the essay too much, but we also have a mini bundle for the essay that takes the student from brainstorming a good topic to showcase who they are to a finished product, or we have hourly essay help if your student just needs somebody to read over the essay and give some feedback. All right, Becky.
So what do customers love about us? It's our fixed fee bundles, for sure, our 5-star Google reviews, the numbers of years of experience of our coaches. As Kathleen said, we're all lifetime educators, and they range from 15 years to 45 years. Check us out on Facebook and LinkedIn. Register for a free intro call with one of our coaches to find out more. Thank you so much for listening to us. And now I'm going to turn it over to Kelly from Compass. Take it away, Kelly.
Thanks, Becky. Thanks so much. And everyone, bear with me. I have a little bit of a lingering cold. So if you saw me sniffling during the prior slides, just give me some patience. As we get started, I do want to say we're going to cover a lot of testing information, and it's important that you know that all of the things I'm going to talk about are available in our Compass Guide to College Admission Testing, and you can access that online anytime as a free resource. I do not recommend you try to read this all at once. It's, I think 100+ pages. It's an encyclopedic reference of anything you might have surrounding testing questions. So feel free to look into that if you have any questions about tonight's presentation. Diving right in, we want to talk about the role that tests play in the admission process. And really, I like to approach the testing plan with the mindset of getting the right posture and making sure that families are not over investing in this and preempting the important commitments and other pieces of the high school process that are on a student's plate at the time when they're going through test preparation. But you can see from this slide, the holistic review of applications involves a certain number of factors. And this data is just reported by the National Association of College Admissions Counselors. This is from 2019. So even pre-COVID, you can see grades and rigor are continuously placed in the top spot. So why standardized tests then? Why is this something that continues to be used? One reason here is maybe you've heard of the term grade inflation. So this is the distribution of the average grades given in 1997. So the average reported GPA. B's see the most, and then we see C's and A's on either end of that tiny little curve. Now looking 20 years into the future at the distribution for 2017, you can see there's a big change in the alignment. This is what we mean by grade inflation. In 2017, we see A's being reported, A-, A+, GPAs as the most commonly reported GPA. Of course, many admissions offices will have the context of a student's school, and there might be a historical understanding of that. But really, the reason that folks are keeping tests is that grades are imperfect. They're subject to this kind of inflation. And actually, on the next slide, you'll see that in the COVID year, this was exacerbated by really policies and grading that was intended to provide students with grace. So you can see the acceleration again in the highest reported GPA. As a counterbalance, test scores have consistently been arrayed across this bell curve. There's actually been a little bit of a shift to the left in recent years, probably having to do with maybe some learning loss over the course of COVID. But in general, you're going to get this bell distribution, the most common median scores and the harder to attain higher scores at the tips. So that previous chart shows what scores are most common, but what is a good score? This is something that students, you're going to talk to with your coaches, with your school counselors. It's really relative to the schools you're looking at. So some of the data that's often available is what we call interquartile percentages or ranges. So that just means the median scores of the 50% of the school's admitted students. The best blanket advice is that if you have a score that's within this range or higher, it's competitive because they've admitted students with that score in the past. Of course, there are always going to be magical rainbow unicorn schools like Yale, where even an exceptional score is not going to be enough to stand out. You can see the median 50th percentile there is between 1450 and 1560 on the SAT, 33 to 35 on the ACT. These are really difficult to attain. So it is relative. And actually in the era of test optional policy, there's been this rising tide that's sort of lifted all boats. Students have more agency to submit scores only when they are particularly strong for their application. So schools are able to collect higher scores in general without lower scores being submitted that even out that margin. So talking about the elephant in the room, are these tests going away? What do these policies mean? We have been keeping our eye on testing policies, especially as they've changed more rapidly. And this is where the 416 schools we track shake out. Overwhelmingly, we have test optional policies in place. The teal wedge over here are our temporary test optional policies, and the yellow wedge are the permanent test optional policies. We have a lot of schools who are hoping to collect more data over the course of several years and make sure that accepting applications without admissions or without standardized test scores is really fruitful for their admissions process. A small number of schools have gone back to requiring tests. You probably heard the biggest ones being MIT that kind of led the charge there. And then we have the test-free category. So test-free means they do not consider these tests at all. And the most prominent culprit there is the UC system, who's now test-free for SAT and ACT. We're keeping an eye on this. Again, this is something we update every year in our guide, so always available. The impact of these policies on applications, as I believe Kathleen, you mentioned before, is an increase in applications. This data, I believe, is from the Common App, and we saw a rise in applications by 35.7%. So huge leap in terms of the number of applications going out. Applications per student also ticking up. So that means each student is actually applying to more schools than they have in the past. Really, what it lands on is most test optional policies that have not been confirmed as permanent are still a work in progress. Colleges are looking for ways to evaluate the classes that they've admitted under these policies and trying to find the data that's going to land on the best process. I mean, one thing that's important to recall is that despite the massive increase in applications, many universities have not had corresponding increase in their admission staff. They have the same team working with a much, much higher volume of student applicants. So, the effort here to be fair and to make sure that these applicants are responded to is something that's still ongoing. I'm just going to take a few slides to introduce this. It's something you may have heard about. The SAT is going digital. If you are a junior, don't worry about this. It's not going to impact you. If you are the parent of a sophomore or younger, be prepared. The digital test is rolling out. The digital adaptive model will debut with the PSAT this fall. So if you have a current sophomore at home, they will be taking a digital adaptive PSAT this October. The first official digital SAT will roll out in March of 2024. The big takeaways here, it's shorter. It's almost an hour shorter than the paper and pencil version. It'll be taken on a computer or tablet. It's going to be adaptive in content. This just means that there are certain sections of the test that based on your performance will route you to a section with relative higher difficulty or relative lower difficulty based on the initial performance. They may be proctored in a testing center, may be proctored at your school. There's a lot of flexibility with the digital model, so there's going to be much more flexibility in terms of school day testing and the testing sites themselves. The scale is going to stay the same. It's a 1,600 point scale. College Board has asserted we can trust the scale, we can super score it with the previous tests. So no big changes there. I was one of the students who took it in the era of 2,400 points, and let me tell you, I I didn't enjoy being a guinea pig on a new scale. Because it is a digital test, there is no more non-calculator section. And in fact, there is an integrated calculator tool in the platform for testing. So it's a great resource in terms of equity. If you don't have your trusty TI-84, you'll have the same access to this calculator tool. And shorter reading passages. I'll show an example of this later because it's really stark, but those are the big high points of the digital test. How adaptive testing works, students will either bring their own device or use those provided. There is a testing app. It'll be installed by the students, and basically it's going to enter, the device will enter a kiosk mode. So they can't access other applications. It's highly secure. You're not wandering off, and there's lower risk for possible sniping of answers on someone else's screen. And I think the big move, especially with international rollout, is security. We won't face the same obstacles of having to cancel whole test dates with this new platform. Each section, so verbal and math, will have the first module and then split you off into either more difficult or less difficult based on the performance. Sorry, George, go ahead. As you can see here, this is just kind of a visual representation of how adaptive testing works. So with the first question, the whole scale is available. We know nothing about the student. As they get more questions right or wrong, you can see how the bands narrow into almost a tornado shape. And that's just kind of predicting where they're going to fall on the scale based on the questions they've answered correctly and those questions' relative difficulties. These two pathways represent students who come out with the same exact score, but actually were routed to different modules because of their borderline performance in the first module. So the student on the left was routed to the easier path, and they were able to get more questions correct and scoot a little bit towards the top of the scale in the second module. The student on the right had one more question correct in the first module, and as you can see, the harder content pulled it a little more back and forth on the end, but they ended up with the same scaled score. So the big takeaways here is that a majority of the scale is going to be available to students, whatever module they're on. Really, it's nearly impossible for a 700+ scorer on either of these sections to be routed to the easier module. There's a lot of information on what we call item response theory, which is math I barely understand. And we don't need to get into the weeds on that today. But basically, students are not going to be able to discern which module they're in, the easier or the harder one. And each module is going to have still a mix of easy, medium, and hard questions. So a lot of exposure to the same types of questions. Students won't understand, won't know in the moment which one they're in, and stressing about it, fruitless. So that is your digital SAT, PSAT snack. And now let's get to the good stuff. Making the choice about your exam and planning out your timeline. So if you're in the class of 2025 or later, you're going to have 3 options. But for most of our audience here, we're still looking at the same choice, SAT or ACT. There's some overlap here. It's color coded so you can see which sections correspond with which. One of the consequences of the kind of arms race between SAT and ACT is that the content overlaps quite a bit. Significant differences come on the testing structure, the pace, and you can see that here. So the SAT starts with reading and writing in language. So the reading corresponds to reading on the ACT, writing in language is corresponding to the English on the ACT. The biggest outlier here is the science section on the ACT. I think the science section is very poorly named. I would consider it fast technical reading, because students don't need to bring science knowledge to the test to be successful on these questions. Much like the reading section, all the information you need to answer the questions correctly is going to be provided in the section. ACT, you can see, still has a lingering optional essay. I imagine that is going to go the way of the dodo. The SAT retired theirs back in 2020. So really, most folks don't require this. They don't consider it. There are, I believe, 3 outliers who still require the ACT essay: Martin Luther College, University of Montana Western, and the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. So if those 3 are not on your list, do not consider the essay. It's not going to be adding value to your time. This kind of breaks down the pace distribution for the digital SAT, current paper, SAT, and ACT. So you can sort of see what I mean about the timing. Math timing, you get 80 minutes for a total of 70 questions. On the ACT, you get 60 minutes for 60 questions. So it's a bit more tight on the ACT. And that's true across the board on the SAT and ACT. If we look at the verbal slides, you can see it again. You know, we have 80 minutes, 80 questions, 100 minutes. It's really tight on the timeline for the ACT. You get about 40 seconds per question if you're going through on an even clip, whereas the SAT, you're going to get a little over a minute per question on reading and almost an entire minute on writing and language. I like to look at these counting science as a verbal section. Like I said, it's really similar to the skills you need to be successful in reading. So you can see the difference here. And in particular, the change to the digital SAT will cut this down even more. You're going to get more than a minute per question. Go ahead. This is great. So this is an example of what the short passages will look like on the digital SAT. They're about the length of a tweet, which seems intentional to me. And each what we call these question stems is just going to retain to one question. So instead of reading a big long passage and answering 10 questions about it, you're going to have a snippet about the length of a tweet and one question related to that. The next question will have a completely new stem and you'll start over from there. Compare that to the ACT. And here's an example of what the ACT reading passage looks like. Huge investment of time to read this information. It takes a lot to really mark up the passage and identify the information you need. And yeah, feels like everything hurts and you will die when you face that by comparison. For some folks, this is still going to be the right fit. Testing is always about which one is working best for you to give you the best performance you can achieve. So there are a lot of choices here. And George, if you just want to roll these all down, that's great. For juniors, you're still deciding between traditional SAT and ACT. The best way to do that is to take a practice test of each, compare the scores, compare the experience, and take it from there. If you're a sophomore, there's another choice in the mix. And for sophomores and juniors, there's still an option to abstain from testing altogether. If you're a high-flying sophomore, you really want to test early, the best thing to do is stick with the ACT. It's not going to change. Stick with the familiar and go with what you know. If you take the SAT, and if the SAT is the right test for you, that's fine. Just know that a fall test would likely be administered on paper, and there would need to be a shift in modality if a retest was done in the spring. So making the choice, it comes down to taking the tests. Try a diagnostic. That's something I can set up with you. I know Kathleen has a link. We love to partner with the College Coaches students and offer them each the opportunity to take an SAT and ACT at no charge. So once you take these, you can see here, the SAT and ACT, enemies though they are, they got together and they released a concordance. So we can compare an ACT score directly to an SAT score. And that's what this chart represents. Looking at this, you think, oh, wow, all that red space, all that blue space, it must be really obvious when you take a diagnostic test, which case. I would say a little over half the time, at least, students are going to fall in the judgment call band. And yeah, George, I think there are a couple of animations if you want to mouse through there.
Yep.
Right,
and
so this student—
also to give you about a 5-minute warning.
Perfect, great. This student getting a 22 on the ACT and a 1200 on the SAT, they landed in the SAT zone, and I could confidently advise them to take that without looking back. Their performance was high enough that it seems to be the clear fit. Another student would take these tests, and if they got a 31 on their practice ACT and a 1400 on their practice SAT, they're going to land right in that zone, that judgment call zone. And that's when we'll talk about factors like style, structure, how to feel, how is the timing, and dive a little bit deeper into the intangibles to make the right choice. The next slide just shows an example of one of our practice test reports. So reports are generated once a test is completed with Compass, and especially if a student's taken a PSAT or SAT and an ACT to compare, we do have the little built-in widget up at the top right that shows where you're landing based on that concordance. There's definitely a greater level of analysis in terms of question types and topics, but we could just go ahead and skip the next one and go on to the timeline, which is I'm sure what many of you are curious about. So 11th grade is when you're going to determine which test you're taking. Many students will use their fall PSAT or a practice SAT taken with us and a practice ACT to compare and determine their test preference. The most popular date for a first official test is going to be one of the spring tests. So usually a March SAT, an April ACT, or a May SAT are the most popular first official test. The big thing to remember is you want to get 1 or maybe 2 official tests under your belt by the end of junior year. That being said, the tests offer many opportunities for retaking. We typically recommend a student plan to take the test at least twice to benefit from super scoring. Taking the highest subsection scores from each test date often results in a higher average composite, and about a little more than 3/4 of the school we track do have super scoring policies. So students are very likely to benefit from this on one or another of their applications. So in the spring, you take your first official test, you evaluate your goals, you talk with your counselor, with your coach, you put this in the context of your college list and refining where you hope to end up, and then determine if a retest makes sense. We have June, July dates for the ACT. We have June and August dates for the SAT. All of those will give you plenty of time to get the test scores back for early decision. For regular decision, there's going to be more opportunities in October, November, December. The October SAT usually gets back in time for the early decision, but I try to not overpromise on that, knowing the College Board. So let's talk a little bit about test prep. What do we need from test prep? We really think of it as having 4 parts. So there's content knowledge, how well students know the material, command of strategies, getting to know the test and what works best for them and having tools in their toolbox to tackle this kind of material, emotional discipline, and this is a big one, stress, stamina, anxiety, keeping it together under stressful conditions for a 3-hour test is no joke, and it takes practice. And time management, not only pacing within the section, but making sure you're spacing out your practice over a reasonable period of time to gain momentum and progress ahead of your test. These I think are just really interesting. So this is what we call our heat map of difficulty on the ACT. Most sections, and this is true of the SAT as well, the verbal sections have a kind of random sawtooth difficulty distribution. You can see they look like Mike and Ike's to me. So we've got the easy green Mike and Ike's all the way up to the spiciest, hardest red Mike and Ike's. But they're mixed up fairly evenly across the distribution. So you're getting with each passage a mix of easy, medium, and hard questions. Compare that to the math distribution, and this is true on the SAT too. The questions are going to increase in difficulty as you go. So, for a student who's, I was not a big math person. Theater kid, I know, big surprise. But for somebody who is not a math rock star, the focus of my test preparation should really be on questions 1 through 40. Those ones that I know I can achieve based on my knowledge. Because each question that you get correct is going to be worth the same amount of points, same raw score and converting to a scaled score. So I can make the best, most efficient use of my time by capturing questions 1 through 40. And then, with 2 minutes left, take the wheel and just bubble in my favorite letter and let the statistics gods give me some extra points there on those questions that I didn't really have any business messing with in the first place. Okay, great. So yeah, in conclusion, we really support a reasonable length of time. Most gains by students are made with a reasonable amount of prep. Once you start to see yourself at the top side of your goal or the top side of the scale, a few more points is going to be pretty hard fought. So I always encourage families to kind of reevaluate with their college counselor. They're welcome to consult me on testing plans as well. Some of the ways we help are our group classes. So this is a new offering we're really excited about. We have small group instruction available online. It's a really reasonable rate. It's $8.95 per student, which just opens the door, I think, to more folks nationally who want access to the materials, to the tech resources we have, to the quality of our instructors. But for one-to-one, it's just not a fit. However, we do offer one-on-one instruction. In some cases, that is the more efficient approach, depending on a student's unique circumstances. In any case, if you have interest with any of Compass's services, please feel free to contact me. I am the point of contact for any college coaches' families. Happy to answer questions you have about this presentation or your own testing journey. And I hope that I wrapped up with time for the Q&A.
Absolutely. Excellent. Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Kelly,
great.
for sharing your expertise and kind of demystifying. It's very, very helpful. All right. At this point, we would love to open it to questions regarding anything. If you want to enter your question in the Q&A, George is going to act as the moderator, and I will be quiet so he can do that.
Yep. So I think everyone's muted, so you do have to type in your questions in the Q&A. You can just put it in there either anonymously or you can tell us who you are. Stand up and be proud. Okay, so the first question, and this is for Kathleen or Becky. Person writes, they say, I'm familiar with the common application essay, but want to know if that works for all schools. And can you also talk about what schools require in addition to the common application essay? Well, I can't read that.
Becky, you or me, you pick.
I'll take that. So there are right now many school of 950, about 950 colleges or whatever that use a common application. And that number increases kind of every year. They add new members in July. So that's something to just kind of check out. Some colleges will have their own online applications, which quite frankly are easier in some regards and sometimes shorter than the common application. And answering the question about essays. A lot of colleges, and it tends to be more selective institutions, will have what they call supplemental essays. They range in size, really length, rather, I guess is a better word, length of anywhere from about 30 words to up to 250 or 300 words. And they're usually about something specific to the college. For example, a lot of schools will have a question about why fill in the blank name of school, and it should be something specific that is relevant to the student and relevant to the school. So for example, living outside of Philadelphia, been a number of students who applied to Penn. Penn used to have this as a question, why Penn? Well, you don't want to say, well, it's in Philadelphia and it was founded by Benjamin Franklin. That's not a great answer. So it needs to be something that makes a fit for the student and is specific to the student, you know, if they visited the campus and feel at home and that kind of thing. And we certainly at College Coaches help with that as well, supplemental essays in addition to the Common App essay. So I hope that answers your question.
Super. I will mark that one as well answered. Next question. This one's for you, Kelly. I'm going to try to be like a game show host, like my friend Kathleen. Kelly, is it true that the ACT is generally better for STEM/math talented students? Does your analysis change if they are challenged by the time limits of the test?
It's a great question. I've heard of this one before. I don't think that the ACT is a better fit, or really either test has a better fit depending on a student's academic talents. It really does come down to how they experience the test. And I do get that a lot, and many families or students may be intimidated, especially on the East Coast. I grew up in the Midwest where the ACT was bread and butter and everyone knew about it. But it's really intimidating to look at and say, oh, wow, I have a standardized test that includes science. That's never really been on the radar. But again, it's really more about a student's capability to analyze and comprehend the information presented in the section. The science section, although it's close to reading, has a little more interpretation in charts and graphs. So some STEM students actually do just have more practice at that. But otherwise, I don't think that there's a natural inclination there. And the follow-up question, does your analysis change if they are challenged by the time limits of the test? That depends. You know, if the scores far and away indicate the ACT is the fit based on our concordance, I tend to think that timing is something the student is going to be able to master, and practice is what comes into play there. We always support our tutoring with homework. Sometimes the homework is timed, as well as full-length timed practice tests to help students continue to hone in on that timing intuitively and really build the stamina necessary to stay focused and complete the section in time.
Super, thank you. Next question. This question is about test optional colleges and how they pick their students. So it's actually a question probably for Kathleen or Becky, although Kelly, you're welcome to chime in. So the question is, what will the colleges look for if they are test optional or have no test requirement at all? They have to make some sort of judgment call. What do they judge upon?
I hit my buzzer first, George, so I'll take this one.
Yes, Kathleen for 350.
Exactly. 550. Come on, it's a multi-layer question.
An easy question.
So many colleges went test optional as a result of the pandemic. Yes, many like Bates were test optional on their own years ago, but the colleges had to go test optional, many of them, because schools were closed and they couldn't take the test. As a result, the colleges retrained their admissions staff to look at an applicant without the test scores. What that means in a nutshell is the other aspects of the application took on more weight, which means they looked a little more closely at the transcript, which always remains the number one factor in admissions decisions, the grades, basically. Second, they look at the extracurriculars deeply. How involved in this is the student outside of the classroom? When they get to the college community, they want the students to be involved. The admissions people are not going to sing in the glee club and play for the sports team and do all that good stuff. They'll look closely at rec letters from the teachers and the counselor. They'll look at the student's essay and the supplements more carefully. If an interview is considered, that counts too. If demonstrated interest is important to the college, that counts too. So we college counselors have worked with parents a lot, understandably, who are wondering, does test optional really mean test optional? And colleges say, yes, we mean it. It's not a trick. And then we say, okay, well, if a student doesn't submit testing and they're from an area where lots of kids usually submit testing, are you going to assume that the student did poorly on the test? And the reps say, look, we don't have time to guess what's going on in a 17-year-old's mind. And a lot of students don't take the tests now because of principle. They feel like it is a rigged thing and you can prepare for it, that kind of thing. The last thing I'll say on this is then we say back it up with data. How many students were accepted with testing and how many without it? And it ends up being half and half. So the point is, if the testing is there, it's considered. If it's not, everything else takes on a little bit more importance.
So if you can still get a good test, it certainly doesn't hurt.
Absolutely. A good test score is always another reason to admit.
Yep. Another question for Kelly. Can you describe a little bit more about the adaptive SAT? It seems unclear how students answering different questions with different level of difficulty can score the same.
That's a great question. And it really comes down to the wealth of data that the SAT has available on the questions they're using. So the SAT has existed for decades. We know it, we love it to a certain extent. And they have a lot of data on this question. A student who scores this usually gets it right. A student who scores this usually gets it wrong. So that data comes into play. But the important thing here, it's called item response theory. And the gist of it is that certain questions give us more information about certain students. The analogy I like to use is it's basketball, right? If I wanted to evaluate a student's basketball skills, I might have them all start by doing 5 layups, 5 free throws, 5 3-pointers. The students who are crushing it and getting, they're getting a bunch of the 3-pointers right, they need to be looking again at those 3-pointers, so those hardest questions. They need more of those to discern themselves amongst each other. A student who's getting the layups, getting most of the free throws, but not really got good odds on the 3-pointer, they need to distinguish themselves from their peers with more medium difficulty questions, with more easy questions. So certain questions give us more information about students in that respect. And so if there's a student who has, gotten all of their 3-pointers, if they missed a layup back there, it was probably a fluke. And that's the whole point of adaptive testing, is to get more information using curated questions in less time.
Outstanding. That is all the questions we have. All
right.
We're coming up, we're about 5 minutes ahead of schedule. But I think we can wrap things up unless there's anything else you want to say, Kathleen, Kelly, Becky.
I always have something to say. Number one, I want to thank you all for spending part of your evening with us. We really appreciate it. A special thank you to Kelly and Compass Education Prep. They are a nationally respected and recognized organization. So for them to join us tonight is a true honor. And I also want to just give a little heads up that next Wednesday at 7 p.m. we are having another webinar. And the focus of that is going to be show me the money. Not really, but it's going to be with the college funding coach. They'll talk about strategic but ethical ways to pay for college. So that's this time next week. But thank you very much to my colleague Becky and my, I don't know what I call George. We're, kind of been together 25 years, something or other. Thanks again for coming tonight. And you all have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. And
Thank you for coming.
Feel free to sign up for a for introduction if you like. All right, Kathleen, I think you can stop the meeting and then we'll rejoin.